homies, come sit down, you know? A little bit more of a chill one today. I feel somber, you know? Because as hype of a fun day this was today, you know, it's last day of the peak, you know? Last day of the whole new cycle I tried running, which is awesome. You know, we made it. No pain. Who would have guessed? But, you know, you get to that point sometimes where, you know, you're at the end. You finally push through, regardless of what happened, regardless of what weights you hit, regardless of, you know, how good you felt the whole way through. You committed. You stayed consistent. You finished out. You know, you did your absolute best that you knew you had in you. And it's always a question of, what do we do now? You know, what's the next step? What's going to be the best next step? And I don't really ever have an answer for people. You know, a buddy of mine today was asking me for like certain workouts to work out certain parts of your body. And I was like, well, there's a bunch of these that I know of. But the biggest thing about everything in weightlifting is trial and error, you know? And not just trial and error to just try everything and just fuck around for who cares, but giving a shit, you know? Like actually caring and being fully passionate in each attempt that you give a new lift, you know? You got to be able to give it that best next step. And even though I always do the same lifts every week, I always do them with a different intention, a different state of mind, you know, a different purpose, you know, a different want for the aftermath, you know, whatever productive afterthought I can have beyond the weightlifting, you know, the mental sometimes. Everything changes every cycle. But the biggest thing that I want to do is push through them and actually make it, you know, cross that finish line. Because today, you know, I did the clean jerk accessory was fine. You know, I did a split jerk thruster. Always fun to do those, just jumping straight into it through the clean. But, you know, it's last day of the peak week. This, especially with me just like kind of picking and choosing at random what weights to do along the way, I'm burnt out. I am so tired. So it's been tough, you know? So I gotta give myself that availability to just chill out a little bit. I've done 295 on a split jerk thruster, but I'm not trying to beat new weights right now. I'm just trying to do good enough, you know, put in that good effort for that good technique so that it can transfer over to the next cycle on this program, you know? So I'm really happy with 275, by the way. The form was back and forth a lot. Again, the biggest thing is my low back and my CNS is shattered, especially after yesterday. I'm tired, you know? And so really just kind of gave it a good technical lift, but didn't push it to the absolute limit. You know, it just wasn't worth putting that much risk behind it. The bench was, I think, a really good step into what kind of mindset I want to have, or at least like the kind of confidence I want to have in these lifts, because everything felt great. Honestly, I've been doing really, really well. Everything's been moving the way I want it to. But you know, the core wasn't there. It was really hard to push through. I got back up to 345, but didn't hit it by quite literally half an inch. You'll see it. I grinded, you know, and by the way, it's a great thing because I would rather have a super tough grind where I'm stuck paused in the sticking point than a really shaky, you know, going toward my head, or like my elbows are flying out in the wrong directions, like bad kind of lift where I fail immediately. You know, it's good that I can stick to the push through regardless of my body wanting to give in. You know, that's why people lift their hips off the bench. It gives them that little bit of comfort and relaxation, even though that's not going to be what makes them stick through the weight at its best. You know, me sticking to the technique and just putting everything into the drive and that momentum, regardless of how much I felt it pushing back, was the best chance I could have had at maybe hitting it. And the biggest thing that I thought of, you know, because you'll see at the end, like I was just laughing about it. It was just funny because it doesn't upset me to fail anymore, you know? And I think that's a really wonderful thing to be able to have. It doesn't matter if I hit the weight or not. I know what my potential is. I know what I've done. I know what I deserve. I know what I can try next time, you know? And I want to work on it. You know, I really want to give it that best chance to grow at its own rate without overthinking it, because it doesn't need all the extra bullshit on top of it. It's just do what you know is best according to your experience, you know, according to your passions. But I think one of the bigger things was that even though I failed, I know that I'm ready for the next weight, you know? the standard and the base that I've set up with this program is amazing, for sure. It's a great step into a genuine progressive overload with a program that suits my current needs, and my current capabilities and my current limitations, Because regardless of how I did or what weights I failed along the way or which weights I hit, because I had a decent amount of fails, and that's fine. I put in the effort to try to earn those weights one way or another. And even though I failed 345, and I am going to count the 345 from the other day, the guy says he didn't touch it. I'll believe him. I think he might have, but one way or another, I have the strength to do this. And this program, let me be super frank, even though I'm making the best step forward and I have the basis I need to create the best program possible beyond today, this setup cycle was not efficient at all. At all. The first week, I tried going all volume, doing a triple every set on Olympic lifts, doing way too much, not doing any of the technical accessories that make my lifting a little bit better in my core and my confidence and my overall technical aspects. So that first week, I didn't even really make much gains. I just kind of was fucking around with volume to get a good basis for my core. The next week, I got a good ground for what I felt like doing, but again, I didn't have any top weights to work up to yet, so I was just hitting whatever felt good at like a top set of 3 or a top set of 2, and it wasn't efficient, and that's fine, I was learning, I was figuring it out, and I was just trying my best to get to a new standard. This peak week is what I needed to reevaluate where I am, because I know exactly where my strengths are, and I know exactly how well I can peak to these numbers, Even though I failed 345 this time, the inefficiency in the program and the randomness back and forth of not knowing how hard to go in certain days is why it went this way, I can set it up now and actually do it properly according to what I want these standards to become. Some days are going to be lighter than others, but the lighter days are meant to be volume and deload based. I want to have the most explosive and crazy good repetitions in that first volume week, and then building slightly higher in the next week so that I can be fully peaked on the peak week. Because even though I peaked very well this time, and I'm getting back to a normal standard of my old strength, number wise, my core was not ready for this peak week. Genuinely, my core's been obliterated half the days because I had to push through it as hard as I could because of how different it is from what I've been doing, But regardless of these back and forths and figuring it out and whatever, I have that experience now. I failed, but I'm confident in moving forward and increasing these weights and increasing the effort and increasing the efficiency. Because like some days are going to be like a 365 for 5 back squat. We both know I can crush that now. But the whole point is the technical aspect. I want those volume weeks to look robotic with how good the technique can be. I want the barbell to be flying damn near above my head. I hit the top explosion point so hard, It's about building it up so that I have the best chance possible during the peak. I can't peak every week. I can't, I have to be realistic. And with this job, doing 12-hour night shifts and the new schedule and just always being busy, I don't have the energy I did when I had no job and no school, So I got to take that into account and be okay with some days being lighter than my absolute full potential so that I can have that absolute perfect chance at the end. And even if it isn't perfect, and even if it doesn't go the way I want it to, it doesn't matter. I gave it my best, And I gave myself the best opportunity to get there. That's what matters. There's even something that you guys won't see. Right as I'm leaving the gym, one of my homies pulled me aside and he's like, "Hey man, have you ever thought of using the stiff bar?" I already obviously know that stiff bars are better for bench, but the gym that I'm at, the only options are a whippy Olympic barbell with a proper bar width, the bar isn't too big, or a squat bar that's basically an elephant bar. It's wide as shit. I have baby hands, so it fully engulfs my entire palm just holding it. So I always felt a little bit unstable before. I was like, what? This is a time to reset, get a new standard, figure out the new ground base. Let's just have fun. Let me feel out a single plate and just see if it feels good. Dude, it reminded me so much of the barbell I used to use back when I was in Orlando a year ago. Because they have the stiff bars there, And it makes a lot of sense why I was able to go so hard on bench for so long without injuring myself, because this bar that I'm using now is so whippy and turns in my palms that, like, you'll see it on the last attempt on bench. I think the reason I failed is because I hit that sticking point right where I needed to, but then I had to restabilize my elbows the whole way through without being able to grind through with a genuine full extension. You know, I was worrying about technique right at the end because it just kept trying to wobble. So I'm going to try the stiff bar next time. It's big, but again, I have a bone growth in my left hand anyway. I think it might be good to have my palms fully taken up so that it doesn't have any room to turn in my hands. It might take some time to get used to, but I want to try, and it might be the best next step I can take. So I might as well give it the attempt, especially on a volume week, and then see where it goes, you know? And if it doesn't work, back to normal, you know? Doesn't matter. We're making progress, you know? We're stepping through, we're doing the best that we can, and that's all that matters, for real. You know, it's so much just taking it in, you know? You got to be able to just get to the end of that program, and no matter where you failed and no matter how better you did than you thought or not as good as you thought you would be able to do, doesn't matter. All that matters is that you're confident in your own technique, physical capabilities, and health on top of the effort you put behind it. You know, did you legitimately try your best? Because you'll know if you do. I promise. Even on the days that I go light on purpose, even if it's not my absolute best number-wise, I put my best effort for that lighter weight, you know? Make every single rep like a max-out weight, you know? Make each rep matter so that it transitions to that next step that you want to get to, that next level. I'm incredibly excited to see what I'm capable of when I get to this next cycle, because it's going to be different. It's going to be different. I don't know how it's going to go. I've already written it out for the most part. It's going to be like semi percentage based, just so I don't overdo it on the volume weeks building up to the peak week. I want to see how that feels again, because I might be able to do a genuine progressive overload like I've been wanting to get back to, while having those little fuck around days in between on the recovery Olympic days. You know, you never know. So I'm just going to give it the best shot I got and move on. You know, we will get stronger. We will get better. I'm not worried about that. It's just taking it one step at a time, you know? Physically, wasn't my best. I'm tired. End of the program. You're going to have that feeling initially of just super burnt out, you know? Because you finally got to the end. You can finally fully relax, you know? But the passion will pick back up. You know, the moment I got to come back in for the beginning of the new program, I'll be just as excited, if not more, because I'm not going to know what I'm capable of for the next one, right? So I'll give it a really, really solid 8.7. There wasn't anything crazy, to be honest. Core wasn't really where I wanted to be, and I didn't have that explosive factor to really whip it as hard as I want, but the technique shone through, you know? The efforts I put in to learn and do my best to hone the technique regardless of how fatigued I am or how much my core is shattered, it's really pulled through to the end. So I'm happy that I was able to stick through as heavy as a weight that I could muster with that good a technique. Mentally, I honestly, I don't even know. It's so weird. I've been fighting for the past year to have no pain, to have full confidence, to get back not just to old strength and numbers, but old strength and the confidence I have in completing a full program cycle without something getting injured or something having to be set back or having to take days off and then come back a week later so that I have a full reset or rewriting the program. It's the first time I've just I hit the cycle. I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I did it well, and I can keep progressing. You know, it's like, it feels like my first step toward legitimate number progression, you know? I'm not a big material guy. I'm not big on worrying about how heavy I can go, but it's as much of an accessory as it is to the passion of my lifting. It's really nice to see at the end of a program. You know, it's really nice to think about for the future of my program. So I'm in my head a little bit because it's fun to think about, and I'm definitely somber about it. But I mean, that just means I care that much about it, you know? That just means that's how passionate I am, and I'm hitting that I'm hitting that wall where I'm just like, I want to relax for a day. It's going to be a good rest day tomorrow. And I'm diving back into the unknown. But for the first time in so long, there's no pain attributed to it, you know? So, I mean, I'll give it a solid 9.35. It was still a great day. I had a great day with the homies. But now I'm sitting here and I'm it feels so weird, you know? I'm finally at the end of that year-long battle against my knee and my shoulder and my chest, my low back, my core. Everything that I gained inefficiencies in are finally slipping away, and I can create a new battle to get onto, but I don't know what that's going to be yet. So the next step is to just find a clear and direct and desirable purpose behind this new stage of lifting that I have. So we'll see what happens. I'll be back day after tomorrow as always. I'm going to be back. I got to, but I appreciate you guys hearing me out. I know it's a different one today, but it's cool that we're here. I couldn't have it any other way, and this is what I mean when I tell people that you have to commit to the long run. It's not just a couple month recovery and then you'll be back to 100%. You have to commit to the years that it'll take to reach a new normal. I'm gonna get out of y'all's hair. I'm gonna know how your life and lives been going. Love hearing about it, and I'll be back day after tomorrow for Snatch Focus Day at the beginning of the new program. See you later. Love you. Bye.